Hello, this is Pre-Cal Lecture 2.4 where we're going to talk about quadratics. So quadratics are second degree polynomials. So it means you have an x squared in the equation. So section 2.4.1, we're going to talk about solving quadratics by factoring. So our first example, let's say we have x squared is equal to 25. So you can probably just eyeball that, and you know that x is going to be equal to, maybe you will just say 5. However, there are two numbers that if you square it will give you 25. 5 will do it, but also negative 5 will do it. So the answer is actually plus or minus 5. So with quadratics, there may be more than one solution. To solve a quadratic, and what I mean by that is a quadratic equation, we want to set the equation equal to 0 and try to factor. So back to our initial example, let's say we have x squared is equal to 25. To set that equal to 0, we would subtract 25 from both sides. So bring that 25 over to the left. So it'd make it x squared minus 25 is equal to 0. And you may recognize that, hey, that's the difference of two perfect squares. So I can factor that into x plus 5 times x minus 5. Okay, so one of these two sets of parentheses has to be 0 in order for the whole thing to be 0. Okay, so let's write that out. One of, or they could both be 0, of these parentheses must be 0, because anything times 0, let's say this first one is 0, whatever this is, doesn't matter. 0 times anything is going to be 0. All right, so what do we do then to solve? So, well, what you want to do is take each set of parentheses and set it equal to 0 on its own. So we'd have x plus 5 equals 0. So subtract both sides, subtract 5 from both sides, and you have x equals negative 5. And we would then set x minus 5, the second parenthesis, equal to 0. We would add 5 to both sides, and then x is equal to 5. All right, so we have two solutions. X is equal to plus or minus 5. All right. So let's just keep on with the examples. So we're still in section 2.4.1. By the way, you're using your own paper for these notes. Don't have any pre-printed notes for this lecture. So next example, let's say we have 3x squared minus 7x equals 0. Okay, well, the first thing you might want to do is factor out something. Let's factor out an x, because x is common to both of those terms. So that then we would have 3x minus 7 is equal to 0. And then we can set both sections of this left side equal to 0. Well, the first one is x. if x is equal to 0, 0 times, if x was 0, this would be 3 times 0, which is 0 minus 7. So that'd be 0 times negative 7, and that's going to be 0. So this whole, just because it's not in a parenthesis doesn't mean that it can't be a 0. And then we're going to set this, just the parenthesis by itself, 3x minus 7 equal to 0. Add 7 to both sides, so I think of it as pushing the 7 over to the right and making it positive. 3x is equal to 7. Divide both sides by 3, and x is equal to 7 thirds. All right, so our two solutions are x equals 0 and 7 thirds. And you could plug both of those numbers back in and see if it works. Okay, so you can plug 0 in, and that by eyeballing works, and then try plugging in 7 thirds for x and see if that makes this equation equal to 0. All right, let's do another example. How about we want to solve for x? Of course, that's going to be the instructions on all of these. Solve for x, and we have 2x squared minus 5x minus 3 equals 0. Okay, let's see if we can factor this. So we got experience in this just a few sections ago. I know 2 only is a prime number, so it can only be 2x and x. And then this 3 is also a prime number, so it's going to be either 3 and 1 or 1 and 3. I'm thinking it's going to be 1 and 3 because on the outside we'd have a 6 and on the inside we'd have a 1. And I can make that into, I can make it into a negative 5x in the middle. So we have 2x squared plus x minus 6x, that's negative 5x, and 1 times negative 3 is negative 3. So it works if you FOIL it back out. Now we're going to set each parenthesis equal to 0. So 2x plus 1 is equal to 0. And then the second parenthesis, x minus 3 is equal to 0. So we'd have 2x is equal to negative 1 here. So x is equal to negative 1/2. And over here, add 3 to both sides. X is equal to 3. So we have two solutions. X is equal to negative 1/2 and 3. And you could test that by plugging back into the original and see if it works. And I would suggest on a test that you do that if you have time. All right, let's do another one. Of course, if your equation doesn't equal 0, you have to make it equal to 0. So let's say we have this x squared minus 4x is equal to negative 4. We would have to set this equal to 0. We're going to add 4 to both sides. We're going to have x squared minus 4x plus 4 is equal to 0. You've got to do that part first. So now we want to see if we can factor this. So we've got x, and I think a minus 2 and a minus 2 will work because that would give me a negative 4x in the center, and negative 2 times negative 2 would be positive 4. In this case, we only have one solution. What value of x would make either parenthesis 0? Well, that's going to be 2. So sometimes there's only one solution. Sometimes there's no solutions or no solution. All right, that's no big deal if that's the case. All right, excuse me there. Let's see, let's try another one. Let's say we have x plus 2 all squared is equal to 16. All right, I don't like the squared part there, right? So let's take the square root of both sides. Now when you do that, we do introduce a potential problem, But let's take the square root of x plus 2 all squared is equal to the square root of 16. Now if you take the square root of something squared, then the squared part and the square root part cancel each other out, and all you have is x plus 2. But here's where it gets tricky. There are two numbers that if you square them will give you 16, positive 4 and negative 4. So it's actually plus or minus 4 here. Negative 4 all squared would give you 16, as well as positive 4 squared. All right, so be careful with that. So what we would have, we'd have x plus 2 is equal to 4. That's 1. And then the other one is x plus 2 is equal to negative 4. All right, x plus 2 is the negative side and the positive side. So in this case, x would be 2. And in this case, x is negative 6, solving for x. So our two solutions are x is equal to negative 6 and 2. All right, but there's an alternate way to do that I'd like to show you. This is certainly a one way to do it, but you do have to be careful with the plus or minus 4 there and not forget that. A lot of students do forget that. So our alternate solution to that problem. So let's say we have, go back to the beginning, we have x plus 2 all squared is equal to 16. So instead of taking the square root of both sides, I'm going to write this x plus 2 twice, because that's all squaring x plus 2 is. Itself multiplied by itself. All right, now I'm going to FOIL this out. So first term, x squared. And then you'd have plus 2x plus 2x. So the outside and the inside would add up to 4x. And then 2 times 2 would be plus 4 is equal to 16. All right, now I've got to set this equal to 0. So we'd have x squared plus 4x. And then if I subtract 16 from both sides, we'd have minus 12 is equal to 0. And now I'm going to factor. So we have x, and a 6 and a 2. How about plus 6 minus 2 will work on factoring. That'd give us a positive 4 and a negative 12. And then we would have on the left parenthesis, x plus 6 is equal to 0. The right parenthesis, x minus 2 is equal to 0. So x is equal to negative 6, and x is equal to 2 on that side. So you got the same answer, and you didn't have to remember the plus or minus root of the square root of 16. Okay, so that's another way to do it. Either way is fine with me. All right, let's go to section 2.4.2. So this is solving quadratics. And all of this, I hope, is review from Algebra 2 or even Algebra 1 by completing the square. So this is a technique to use when you can't factor. All right. So just a little bullet here. The coefficient in front of the squared term must be 1 to use this method. All right, it's got to be 1. Okay, so let me show you how to do this. Let's say we've got x squared plus 6x plus 1 is equal to 0. Well, you can try, but you can't factor that. So here's the technique. Now we've got the coefficient in front of x squared is 1, so we're good with that. This is what I want you to do. I want you to write x squared plus 6x plus blank. And then we're going to move the 1 to the right side. We have to make it negative, right? We have to change the sign. Is equal to -1 plus blank. All right, all I did was move that 1 to the right side, and then I've got a blank there, and if in order to add something to the left side, I have to add the same exact thing to the right side. So what you want to do is the term in front of the x, the coefficient in front of the x, you want to take half and square it. And we're going to add that number to each side. So half of 6 is 3. Half of 6 is 3. 3 squared is 9. So I'm going to add a 9 to both sides. So now we've got x squared plus 6x plus 9 is equal to -1 plus 9 is 8. Now we can factor this. It's a perfect square, actually. So how would we factor? It's x plus 3 times x plus 3. Now, if you want to know the quick way to know what it's going to be, is it's half that middle term. All right? Half of 6 is 3, so it's x plus 3 times x plus 3. Double check. X squared plus 3x plus 3x is 6x. 3 times 3, 9. So I'm going to rewrite this as x plus 3 all squared is equal to 8. Now I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Take the square root of both sides. So I've got the square root of x plus 3 all squared is equal to the square root of 8. But it's not just the square root of 8. It's plus or minus the square root of 8. Okay? Because there are positive and negative roots. When you square something, square a negative, you get a positive. Okay. So the square root and the squared term cancel each other out, and you just have x plus 3 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 8. And then we're going to move the 3 to the right, so x is equal to -3 plus or minus the square root of 8. So that's your two solutions, -3 plus or minus the square root of 8. Okay, so that's going to be -3 plus the square root of 8, -3 minus the square root of 8. You can put both of those numbers in your calculator. You'll get a decimal, and then plug it in, and you'll end up getting 0. Okay, there could be a little bit of rounding, but this is a fine way to present it. You can present it with the plus or minus. All right. Okay, let's do one when the coefficient does not equal 1. So if it doesn't equal 1 in front of the x squared term, then we're going to have to make it be 1. All right, so this is our last example of this lecture. Let's say let's just write when coefficient in front of x squared does not equal 1. All right, so let's say we have 2x squared. Oh, I already got the example written. 2x squared plus 4x minus 1 equals 0. All right, you can't factor that, and they've got a 2 in front. So what we want to do is divide both sides by that coefficient in front, by 2. So I would have 2x squared plus 4x minus 1 equals 0. I'm going to divide all of those terms by 2, and then the right side also by 2. So when you do that, 2 into 2x squared is just x squared. But it's legal to do that as long as you do it to both sides. So 2 will go into 4 2 times, so plus 2x minus 1/2. And 0 over 2 is just 0. So now we're going to take that and go through the completing the square process. So we'd have x squared plus 2x plus blank is equal to positive 1/2. I'm moving this negative 1/2 to the right. That makes it positive plus blank. So we're going to take half of 2x and square it, right? Half and square. Half of 2 is 1. 1 squared is 1. So we have to add 1 to both sides. So now I've got x squared plus 2x plus 1 is equal to 1/2 or 3/2. So now this will factor into x plus 1 times x plus 1, right? It's that number there, the half of this number, which is 1. And you can test that. X squared plus 1x plus 1x is 2x, plus 1 times 1 is 1. So that's x plus 1 all squared is equal to 3/2. Now we're going to take, you don't have to write this out every time, take the square root of both sides. All right, so when we do that, we would have the square root of x plus 1 all squared is equal to plus or minus the square root of 3/2. Don't forget the plus or minus. All right, so what happens? The square root and the squared cancel, and you have x plus 1 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 3/2. And then we can move the 1 to the right side to solve for x. So x is negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 3/2. And it's fine with me if you don't, in this case, rationalize that. And then you could put that in your calculator, figure out what the decimal number is, and then check it. You can check all of these. Okay. So let's talk about the homework. So the homework is worksheet 2.4a. There is no 2.4b. I thought there might be when I developed these worksheets a long time ago, but never came up with a 2.4b, and I didn't change it. But just looking at it, we've got to solve by factoring with these first these first 5. If it's like this in number 2, remember you've got to move everything to one side and set it equal to 0. These are take the square root of each side. But you do have to set it equal to 0. And then the last 5 are solved by completing the square. And then again, if the coefficient in front of the x squared term, like here, is not 1, you have to make it 1. All right, so that'll do it. And I will talk to you on the next video.